You're listening to Nereid Atlas, where global stories tend to become more complicated the closer you look at them. I'm Lucas. Here's the headline. Prosecutors have filed an indictment against an Israeli settler in connection with the 2025 killing of Palestinian activist Awdah Hathaleen. A man is charged, a court process is starting, and a family is waiting to see what justice looks like. It's a simple sentence with a lot of weight behind it. This case sits on the line between grief and law, trust in institutions, questions about impunity, and even the terms we reach for: settler, activist, killing. And if the first version you heard framed it differently, it may already feel like a breakthrough, an overreach, or something uneasily in between. We pulled together 13 articles from 11 outlets across 7 countries: Israeli newspapers, British and Canadian papers, US coverage, plus state-aligned TV in Qatar and Russia, alongside France 24 and the BBC, published between August 5th and 7th, 2026. Side by side, the picture sharpens and shifts. Elena's been tracing what changes when you zoom in. Elena? Nereid Atlas. Synthetic voices. Real analysis.
Indicted is one of those words that lands like closure to some people and like a setup to others.
What's the case that's doing this to us today?
An Israeli settler was indicted for the 2025 killing of Palestinian activist Awdah Hathaleen.
Right. On its face, that reads as accountability.
One narrative leans hard into that. It treats the indictment as proof the rule of law can reach across a very charged divide. It says, the system isn't blind, but it isn't powerless either.
And the other narrative?
Another sees it as the exception that proves the rule. It emphasizes how rare this feels, or how delayed. The indictment becomes a symbol of all the cases that didn't get one.
And I can already hear a third, the one that contests the labels.
Exactly. Activist can be recast as agitator. Settler can be softened to resident, or made sharper by keeping settler. Killing can turn into incident, or confrontation, or tragedy. Each choice pulls the listener toward who is threatened, who is justified.
So 2 readers sit on the same train. One sees settler indicted for killing activist. The other sees resident charged after deadly clash. They're not reading different facts. They're breathing different air.
And the air matters. In the accountability frame, the state appears responsible and trustworthy. Prosecutors as professionals following evidence. In the systemic impunity frame, the trustworthy voices are the victim's community or rights advocates who've kept score for years. In the contest the labels frame, the credible source is security logic, the defendant's account, the danger, the split second.
It's not just semantics, though. Someone lost their life.
Which is why the labels carry weight. Activist tells you he had purpose and community. Killing tells you there's agency. Switch any one of those words and you shift where sympathy and blame rest.
What does each narrative leave out?
The accountability one may underplay patterns. It asks you to see an institution rather than a history. The systemic one may underplay legal process. It asks you to see a pattern more than a person in a dock. The self-defense one can omit the power imbalance. It makes uncertainty the core fact and treats motive as unknowable.
Same headline, 3 shadows.
And a reasonable person inhabiting each shadow comes away with a different center of gravity. Relief, anger, or wary defensiveness. Each feels coherent inside its framing.
So the indictment is both a legal step and a kind of Rorschach test.
They only test whether ink is the words themselves.
Keep going, because I can feel the pivot coming.
It's the same event, but it asks you to pick a story. Institutions working, institutions failing, or institutions weaponized. And once you pick, everything else follows.
Walk me into the living room versions. What does a person mostly exposed to the first frame actually believe by bedtime?
In the accountability room, a listener might think, imperfect, yes, but the machinery can still act. Emotionally, there's a small exhale, like, maybe we're not numb to this.
And in the second?
In the exception room, the indictment is a kind of spotlight that throws the surrounding darkness into relief. A listener might think, one case moved, but the structure hasn't. The feeling is not closure, it's vigilance, maybe grief that has learned not to be surprised.
The third room?
The contested labels room centers risk and ambiguity. A listener might think, headlines rush to judgment, context is missing. The accused deserves the presumption of self-defense in a dangerous place. The feeling is protective, sometimes aggrieved.
And you're not saying any of these people are gullible.
No, each posture is a reasonable response to the inputs it prioritizes. Trust in institutions isn't naive if you've seen them work. Distrust isn't cynical if you've watched them fail. And anxiety about snap judgments isn't bad faith if you've lived through them.
What's the hidden lever? The thing quietly driving the split?
The first word you notice. If your push alert leads with indicted, you're primed to see process. If it leads with settler or activist, you're primed to see identity. If it leads with killing, you're primed to see harm and agency. That first word sets your map.
And none of those words are neutral.
They can't be, not here. Even time isn't neutral. 2025 anchors it in a moment people already carry stories about.
There's also the gap between indictment and outcome. Do any of these rooms leave space for "we don't know yet"?
The accountability frame sometimes treats the charge as progress enough. The systemic frame sometimes treats it as theater unless a conviction follows. The self-defense frame sometimes treats the charge as proof of bias before evidence is tested. All three compress uncertainty in different ways.
So the paradox is cruel. The more loudly the indictment is announced, the easier it is for everyone to feel confirmed.
One data point, infinite confirmations.
If you're listening to this on your commute, imagine the person you'll see at lunch. They might have read a different push alert.
Ask them which word they saw first. Indicted, settler, activist, killing.
And what that word made them feel before they thought.
Because in cases like this, feeling is the first fact we carry into the room, long before any verdict arrives.